Hi everyone. Okay. Hi everyone. I'm very excited about tonight's subject. It's something that I believe connects us all, the different disciplines in art. And I'm also excited that Bruno Devos is here with us tonight. He is a curator of art books. He's a managing partner in Stockmans Art Books and Hopper&Fuchs. And he has been collaborating with many artists, very known artists, artist students, a lot of people from the academy, researchers, for many years now, for about 30 years. And he has been as well independently working on art projects and initiating international art projects. So I would like to give him a word now. Thank you for being here. And please.
Thank you, Sanya. Thank you to the Academy for this invitation. Good evening, everybody. We're gonna do a lecture tonight. It's quite informal. It's a cozy place. I think the temple with the background has never looked so warm. So I hope I can warm you up also a little bit. I'm a bit hungry. Guess who's coming to dinner? Actually, I would like to refer to, it's actually about a movie from 1967. I don't know if you know the movie. And I would like to take a quote before I start with my lecture from this movie. And it is a quote of Spencer Tracy, who was actually the main character of the movie. And at a certain moment, he was hungry and he was looking for some ice cream. So in a way, I start with the dessert instead of the entrée. When I had ice cream before, I had a special kind of flavor that I liked very much, but I can't remember what it was. And the lady of the parlor said, "I'll bring you the list, sir." "Oh, no. You must know what it was." Was it daiquiri ice, honeycomb candy, cocoa, coconut, yamocha almond fudge, mocha yamocha, peanut butter and jelly, cinnamon, banana mint? Mr. Tracy said, "I think it must have been another place." Why am I telling this? When I look around in my biotope of every day, it feels like a candy store. When I'm playing with books, and I'm just displaying a small selection of books that we made the last couple of months and years, no book is the same. It's a bit like the flavors of ice cream. There's a huge difference between flavors, colors, textures, sizes, formats, and so on and so on. And I feel, as a curator and publisher of art books, that every book could be and should be adapted to the artist. I have the privilege to work with living artists, which doesn't always make things easier, because each and every artist has his own character, has his own discipline, has his own life cycle. Sometimes I work with very, very young artists, also from the academy, and sometimes I work with a 90-year-old artist. So from that point of view, every book is completely different. Tonight, I want to talk a little bit about the dimensions of making a book. I will speak in terms of this as a book can become a four-dimensional subject and object. Every book, and especially in my case, when I don't work for an institution, starts from a 1D perspective, meaning the artist. Again, it could be a gallery that initiates a book project. It could be a museum. It could be another institution. It could be a company. But in general, my books start with the artist. And I think this is quite interesting, because the artist at a certain moment, he, she, her, he can decide to make a book. And the first question I always ask is, why in heaven's name do you want to make a book? I think it's a challenging question also. I believe every day that making books is the most fantastic thing in my life to do. But on the other hand, I think we should only make a book if there's a use for it, if there's an audience for it, if there's a purpose. And in the dialogue with the artists, we always go and look in this dialogue for a reason why or why not to make a certain book. It depends on many things, and as I told you before, it depends also on the purpose of this publication. Anyway, most of the time it starts with you, the artist. But in a second phase, and now we come to the two-dimension situation of the book, it's impossible, only if it's a one unique copy of a book, it's almost impossible to make a book on your own. Sometimes we need texts. Text needs to be written, translations, photography, scanning, a whole process. Most of the time, on average, we need about 20 to 30 people to finish a book in general, for the whole chain of production when making a book from A to Z. So what I strongly believe, and I think this is also for young artists quite important, is how to process this book production. I think it's always useful to talk with as many people as possible before you start making a book. You could talk to me, but you could also talk to other experts in making books. What I also often anticipate on and what I see is that a lot of artists are afraid of making a book. Why be afraid? You're in your daily practice of creating art, but making a book sounds sometimes so final, so definitive. We all work with social media. We all work with online communication. If you post something and you make a mistake, you forget to tag somebody, in 30 seconds you can erase, either you can alter your message. I can assure you it's not the case when you print and finish a book. When the book is there, it's there. Maybe you can insert some small paper with errata. Maybe you can start correcting some letters in a book. At the moment, and I'm kind of not sure if I'm having fun with it, but I'm doing a little intervention in 2,000 books that we recently published. Because there is this slight mistake in a text somewhere, very slight, and I don't want it. So I decided before we put the books into the shrink wrap to do a little intervention in each of these books. It adds something. It adds especially energy. What I strongly believe, we go from 1D, we go from 2D, is the energy that a lot of people can put into the book. And I strongly believe that the audience or the reader, when they open this book, they can feel it. So, as much as you put in the book yourself, with your team, as much you will enjoy it, and I believe that the audience will also enjoy it more. Two-dimensional, transversal, it's not a two-dimensional object, not at all. We go into a three-dimensional object. When making the book, for me, it's a space. And I think for young artists, I think this is the most challenging, but also the most beautiful way to look at a book, as an open space. Why do I say this? You don't have to limit yourself in any way. Again, if you look at this little candy store here, each and every book is completely different. It's a choice. I made a choice to make every book different in a dialogue, depending on timing, depending on budget, which is a very important factor today. As a commercial publisher, I don't think we are very commercial, but I think we should be, and I think my shareholders would share this idea. As a commercial publishing house, it's quite difficult to make a book profitable. Especially, not every book is a big best-selling book. A lot of times I work with younger artists or mid-career artists who could be world famous in Antwerp or in Ghent or in Kortrijk, but this is only very local situation. So most of these books are not really best-selling books, but still I think it's worth making them. But it's a decision we have to take together. Anyway, to find funding for a book is always a challenge. Maybe if we still have some time, we can go later into that. Again, we go back to the situation of space. The last 2 years, I initiated with the Academy the Stockmans Art Books Prize, which is related to drawing. So from each department of the school, the teachers or professors, they search for a nominee in each department. And what is interesting when I speak about space, the last 4 winners of this prize, 2 of them came from the in situ department. And actually those 2 people are here tonight. And which is nice. Why? The in situ artists, in a way, they look at a book as a space. And I think this is quite interesting. Even if they make drawings, they already feel and they create something extra, which is just not on a 2-dimensional sheet. And again, use your imagination, build something. I always talk about the architecture of a book, again, related to space. The architecture for me is quite technological. It has to do with technology. It has to do with the way we construct a book. But on the other hand, when you look at it from a different perspective, it again has to do with space. Although everything I'm saying tonight, I could skip it, because some weeks ago I had a nice talk with Emma Johnson about her book that we are going to publish quite soon. At a certain moment, after hesitating a little bit, she questioned me and she said, does it really have to be a book? So there is this Stockmans Art Books Prize, and the artist is challenging the fact of publishing a book. So it's about materiality, and it's about immateriality. Anyway, at a certain moment, we've been talking a lot, we've been going through possibilities, we've been going through processes, we've been going through archives, we've been talking about a specific series of artworks that you want to present in this space. We've been talking about 50 years of your practice in a monography, in the comprehensive artist book, and so on and so on. And at the end, we narrow it down to make a certain book. Again, there is a display here of certain publications, some smaller, some thicker, some 800 pages, some 48 pages. I think everything is possible. What I do advise to younger people is try and make as many books as possible. Of course, if you have the time and if you have the money. Why? Because you have to experiment it. To make a book is to experiment. You have your own process where you go through, maybe related to your art, but on the other hand, you have to rethink your process, thanks to making a book. It's quite challenging from that point of view, because you look at your own work from a different perspective. Either you say, we create a narrative from 1 to 1,000, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 9, 9, 9, 1,000. Either you start playing with space, with time, with selections of images. Why not just make a book of 2 pages or of 200 pages, and so on and so on. So to make a book is an incredibly good study to look to your own practice. And again, it's for me the same. I think I've been making more than 300-400 books in my life. And every time I challenge myself and I learn from each and every publication. In this room, Nico Dockx is here, and we had the pleasure already to make books 20 years ago. And today we still experiment. And we love to do it. Sometimes it's a bit challenging from, let's say, craftsmanship point of view. Also from visual point of view. But it's fun. And at the end, most of the time, we are quite proud on what we did. We have an object here. We have something in 3 dimensions. And now we go to a fourth dimension of this book. The fourth dimension is more immaterial. It could be meta, it could be on a super level, it could be somewhere in the sky, it could be a constellation. But for me, the fourth dimension is the fact that at a certain moment, either as an artist, either as a publisher, you give your book away. I buy it in a shop, you give it as a gift to a curator, or to a collector, or to a friend for a family dinner. But you give it away and the book is gone. And from that moment on, the book starts living its own life. A life that can end up the next day in the garbage bin, or a life that can go on in generations and generations and generations of giving this book a second life. I work together with paper merchants and paper factories, and one of them, they guarantee that their paper will survive more or less 500 years. I think this is a nice image, that you can say that this book will last 500 years. It will outlive us. So I think this could be a fourth dimension. Another dimension, which we cannot control, is the archival part of a book. I think it could be a very important purpose of doing books. Today we are completely shotgunned by images and images and images each and every day. I think I see a couple of thousand images each day passing by on my mobile phone, on working on projects, and I think it's too much sometimes. On the other hand, it's part of our environment today. But the book is an alternative environment. So I think, from archival point of view, the book is here to stay. Today I had another lecture at the University of Antwerp, and somebody was challenging me, how do you think on e-books and how do you think on e-platforms and so on for books? And I was like, it's not a competition, it's about sharing, it's about connecting, it's about another way of distributing a certain content, but on the other hand, it has nothing to do with the physicality of what we are seeing here today. So from that point of view, archival, but also the book as an object, I think it's wonderful. I think what I'm doing today is creating a part of cultural heritage. At a certain moment, if you look at a couple of hundred publications, you will connect to a certain period. It could be in Antwerp, it could be in Flanders, it could be in Belgium, it could be in Europe, but it gives a sense of time related to concepts, designs, artist practices, typography, paper, printing technology, and so on and so on. So what I also like as a fourth dimension of the book, which in the beginning had nothing to do with your 1D part, why you made the book, at the end it creates something extra. And that's another fourth dimension. And the last fourth dimension that I would like to address to is that a book is an experience, the more and more. I already told you that it's a space, but today the way we try to make books is that they relate to an experience. And this we can anticipate. Even if we cannot control how Nico or Sanya or Emma or E is feeling the book and how we are going through it, that's a personal thing. It's subjective. On the other hand, what we can do anticipate is how we will use certain technologies and certain materials and anticipate on how you will feel and go through reading a book. It could be my task as a curator, but it can also be an artistic task. If your work challenges people or invites people to create an haptic experience, feeling, touching, seeing, smelling. Lots of people like the smell of ink. My brain is already completely washed out from that point of view, because only if I skip 3 weeks of holiday and I come back to the company, I can smell the ink, but if not, I'm completely out of a sense of ink smell from printing point of view. The book is creating a special experience, and I think, especially today, Many museums, they go for immersive installations and so on in presentation artworks. I think also a book could have this immersive touch. So I think it could be a goal for you when you design a book to already take that into account. So from that point of view, and we're going quite quickly through the process of making a book, because sometimes we work for 3 years on one publication. In other times it can be 1 month. With Nico, we did it already in 1 week, if it was needed. Because sometimes a book doesn't get better if it takes 3 years. On the contrary, sometimes a book needs to have the same energy as the way the artist works, and it has to have the same flow, and it goes quickly. But some people, they work slower in their practice, but also in the way they treat this experiment, the choices they want to make, and so on and so on. And I will say there is always a good time to make your book. It doesn't matter if it's done in 1 week or in 3 years. At the end, you should be happy with the result. So I think this is quite an interesting way of dealing with time making your own publication. Are there questions at the moment? Remarks, ideas? Because in a way we're going quite quickly through the process. This afternoon I was for 3 hours talking on books. Don't worry, I put on my alarm, so it won't take that long. But if you already have some remarks or ideas, please go ahead. If not, we could continue, and I can tell you a little bit some stories about certain books that are lying on the ground. Could be quite practical. At the end of this lecture, you can always pass by and take a look at them, and also maybe challenge certain questions. I will show you this little book that we made a couple of months ago. And why do I show this book? Because it's interesting, because the artist, for about 13 years, she was not presenting any artworks anymore. She was teaching in Brussels, and at a certain moment, Kaat van Doren decided to come out again. She didn't show her work for a long period, but now she felt it was time. And for 2 years, she was working on an installation, in a vitrine installation, let's call it a window, like a shop, in a quite old house in the center of Mechelen in a shopping street. And what she did was blinding for a part with a geometric form her window. And every day she was measuring and waiting for the golden hour, which is also the title of the book, but she was measuring how the sun came in, peeping through a certain geometric form. And then she was measuring all this data, the hour, the date of the day, the hour, and also the degree and the line where the sun was falling in. And consistently she was doing this for 2 years. So it was quite a research project. And she did it every day. Drawing lines, drawing stickers, drawing text on it, scientific data with different colors, year after year. And for her it was quite interesting to say, for example, today is the 23rd of November, 4 o'clock, 2020, today it's 2021, and she would compare the line of last year to the line of this year. At the end, she decided to turn this venue, this little space, as a first room in her house, into a wide space. Before it was like a working space, and now it became a presentation space. So she turned it into a white cube, where she gave only ephemeral registrations in a varnish on the wall, on the floor, with some dates to indicate what she has been doing for 2 years. She had a lot of shots, thousands and thousands of images, registering the process on how the sunlight came in. So the challenge was, at a certain moment, in the beginning, we didn't know which book we were going to make, so it was an open discussion. It could have been a book, a monography, because it's the first book the artist is making, and she's already 50 years old, and she didn't publish before. So in a way, it's a pity. So we could have made a 400-page book telling about 25 years of practice, but we didn't do that. So we selected this series as a main series, and also the design of the book evolved into trying to recreate a certain feeling of this installation. So what we did do was, first of all, we created in the book our own vitrine. It's a piece of plastic, but in a way, it corresponds to the vitrine of her house and of the space where she created the work. Then we also decided to go on a very matte paper to make a contrast with the shiny sun. And then in the book, when you enter the book, in the beginning there is only a white space. Maybe you can take the book and people can take a look at it, please. So if you open the book, you just see some white pages, 16 pages, which are also covered with a UV varnish. So you enter the book in the beginning and it's just white, white, white. Helemaal in het begin. Yeah, please, you can show it a bit. And you can turn around pages, and it's in a way it's a walk. Today, if you want to enter the installation, you need to either take out of your shoes or you get some protective material because it's very touchy, the ground, and very fragile. And the book starts only with white pages. And then you get a series of photography where sometimes there's a sequence of an hour, sometimes there's a sequence of a couple of minutes, to go through the whole process. Sometimes she was filming for 24 hours. So the first part of the book, and this is already more than half of the book, tries to get you into her story without explaining, but just more like experiencing this book. So we tried to do it together with Jean-Michel Meyers, who did the graphic design. And we went through a process of, in the beginning, not telling too much, only visually, but not in text. Afterwards, we have the light. We selected one very dark bitumen installation, which makes a contrast between light and dark. Afterwards, contextual texts were written by an art historian and by a PhD researcher in physics from the University of Leuven. And she also created a text which was more related to the planetary system. There is a vocabulary in the book, the vocabulary that the artist uses for the last 13 years. And at the end of the book, we end the book with piercing of holes. So in a way, we created 5 different papers, including the plastic. We created a narrative of our own, and we ended the book with a very light and thin paper which has piercing holes. Why? Because one of the artworks, a series of artworks that the artist makes, is sitting under a tree. Sun is piercing through the tree. She has some sort of carton board with paper, with holes, and the sun is projected through the holes. And then she starts painting. So she has a whole series of paintings that are again related to the interaction and also the position of the sun. And we try to come as close as possible to her practice. And I think, of course, again, budget is an important factor. We agreed on a certain budget to make this book, which also limited us in a certain way. At the end, we made a more than 300-page book. But it's also a start, this book, because Kat, she didn't come out, she didn't work with galleries, she was a bit in conflict with the gallery system today, which I will say something about, because you introduced me as a curator of art books, and for me the word curator is very definitive and very important, because curator comes from the Latin word curare, and curare means taking care of. And today in the art world, I think a lot of curators sometimes forget that they have to take care of the artist, or that they have to take care of the artwork, of the space, of the mix of stakeholders involved. And that's why today I pretend, and I don't pretend it, I do it every day, that I'm curating books. But for me, it means every day that I need to think from the point of view of the artist. You asked me at a certain moment, what does it mean as a facilitator? And a facilitator is somebody who gives you a certain possibility or helps you to realize something. And I think that's one of the most important tasks of me in my position as a publisher, but also helping you to make certain books. So the little book of cards, I think it's a nice example of making a book that comes quite close to the practice of the artist. Another book that we made recently is the book of Denitsa Todorova. And Denitsa, she's specialized in drawing and painting. And what is interesting, and Kumi is also here, in the beginning with Denitsa, many artists, they are predefined, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, or I give a false interpretation of our little story. But many artists, when they talk about a book, they talk about a hardcover book. And for me, I don't think that's important. We make a lot of hardcover books. Sometimes we have to make a hardcover book even if we don't want to. For example, that book, which has more than 800 pages, Sarajevo to Paris, we had to make a hardcover book because the architecture of the book didn't allow us to make a softcover book. So sometimes there is a reason to go for one or another choice from a technical point of view. But in the case of Denitsa, and she also was thinking on hardcover, but I know her practice already for quite a long while. I've been visiting her atelier several times. And you have to know that she works on a 65 grams, very thin newspaper paper from Scotland, Strathmore, which is a paper with a lot of wood, very thin, and she scratches on the paper. So in a way, she hurts the paper in her practice. She puts a basic layer, and then she starts scratching it and putting another layer, and then again she does things on this paper, making scars, putting another layer, making scars, putting some extra color. So it's a very intense project, the way, very physical too, the way Denitsa works. So when you see this book, I didn't want a hardcover. I want you, as a reader, to come as close as possible to Denitsa's book. How can we do this? At the end, and I will tell you some more little things that we did in design, at the end, we came up with 6 different papers. Why 6? First of all, the cover. Can you help me, please? You can unwrap it if you want to. Dus je kunt het er even afhalen. So, many of Denitsa's paintings, drawings are like 2 meter 20 on 2 meter 40. So they're quite large. And of course, if we narrow down the size of the book, sometimes we make books a little bit bigger, but not often. Again, it has to do with budget and also being practical. It's difficult to get the right proportion and dimension of an artist who makes 2 meter wide or high paintings. So what we try to do in the beginning is zoom in on the images, because this is more like the reality when you see a painting of her. So that's important. So again, we take a walk into our work. You can dive into it. What is also important, these 65 gram papers that I mentioned, if you hang it outside here in this temple room, in about 3 to 6 months, the white paper will degrade to a grayish paper and to a yellowish paper, which is related to the way the pulp of the paper is made with a lot of wood, and also because of the intervention of light. Which means, in this case, if you do like this, sorry, ik moet even zo een beetje plooien. If you take a look at it, we created a sequence of going from white to yellowish paper, which is actually what happens when you present her artworks. So this is also an important intervention in this book to give you an idea how the real artworks of this artist can evolve. Nu mag je dat even, ja, je mocht uitdelen en deze open doen als je wilt, even open plooien. And then we go back to this, in good old times it was called a dust jacket. kun het open doen. You can open it. And it could be a little surprise, or it could be a graphic design gadget. But we try to create something that again enlarges your feeling about approaching the work of Denitsa Todorova. So from that point of view, technically, also with all the folding lines, but again, as I told you, she scratches on her work. These are all scratches. Also, sometimes her work is different parts glued together. So in a way, we wanted to create this cover as an extra tool to come as close as possible to the artworks of the artist. Is this a small intervention or a big intervention? I think it could help to understand and come closer to the artist. Also, this is a bit more technical, but most of the time we print in CMYK for color print process. But in this case, in the black, we added a little bit of silver because the artist is working a lot with graphite. And in this case, there is always a little silvery shiny thing happening. So we just put in a little bit of silver to give this ink perspective a complete different outlook. Nobody can really scientifically say there is so much or so much in this book, but on the other hand, it's there. Recently, we made together a book for Alexis Gauthier, for an exhibition that is now in M Museum Leuven. And for the cover, we created a unique Alexis color, which you will not find, but it was a PMS color, and we added a gold touch in the color. So if you look at this cover of Alexis, I didn't bring the book. It's interesting, but it's an undefinable color. But it's there, and in a way you will say, something is happening. Another publication, and Kumi is here, that we recently made was a photography book. And I told you before that some artists are quite fast in making books. Kumi is really, in her practice, quite slow. So this book is a collection of photos from the last, you have to help me, 8 years or 13 years? 8 years. And it's also interesting because the first time I met Kumi, we started to talk about the format of the book. We started to talk about the technique, how to make this book. And it was really, Kumi, a process of seeing each other on a regular basis. And every time I dropped something. Why? Because it's also a psychological process. It's not a tough negotiation making a book. It should be fun. And I really mean it. That's one of the reasons that I started making books, is because I know so many artists who are unhappy with their book. Luckily, it was not made by me, but in general, it happened a lot, that the artist is working for 2 years in his atelier, creating a show, working incredibly hard to do the finishing touch in a museum, in a gallery, hanging, finishing, polishing his artworks. And if you make a book, apparently it seems that it's not always an easy itinerary. So I think it's a part of, it's not about tough negotiations, how to make a book. It's more getting comfortable with possible ideas of making a book. And also presenting different ways of creating books from architectural point of view, mixing different papers, mixing sizes, mixing binding techniques, bringing golden details into the finishing touch, and so on and so on. For example, coloring the edge of a book. This book is also colored on the edge with yellow, this one is colored red, and so on and so on. And with Kumi, what is also an interesting intervention, if I remember well, we wanted to go for a hardcover book in the beginning. Eh? Okay. But then, for me, the hardcover book, it can be very chic and beautiful, but sometimes it can also create a distance. And this is something I don't want. I don't want to make a coffee table book. I want to make a book that you use, where you maybe make annotations in, where you maybe tear out some pages because you like the image, or you put it on a mood board, and so on and so on. So I want to go very far from a technical point of view, but at the end, I don't want to make a coffee table book. I want to make a book that connects to the audience, but also to the artist. So from Kumi's point of view, Kumi selected this image, and from that point of view, I think we should always follow the artist, because she has been working so long in the process of making this book. So again, at that moment, I go with this image. It's very well thought. It fits with the series. But what strikes me in this image is, of course, the part of the human body, and then this silky textile thing. And this textile thing is also very fragile. So it relates very much to the work of Kumi. And then we decided together at the end to create, and you can help me again, please, to make this book extra fragile. It's a terrible thing. This is already my 5th or 6th show and tell copy, because every time I put it in my valise or my presentation library, something happens with this cover. So it's very fragile, because if you don't take care of it, it will tear apart, it will be broken, it will be ripped. But on the other hand, if you look at this image is ripped too. Je kunt eraf halen helemaal. So again, we decided to give this book an extra touch of fragility, which can work like this. But on the other hand, what also fascinates me, and there will never be statistics, is that you can open up this sleeve. And if you open up the sleeve, if you dare to open it, a new image pops up. And again, this could be a piece of art, or it can be a poster, or it can be just a dust jacket of the book. So again, it's to the audience to experience and to decide what you as an audience will do with this book. And this is what I also mean with making a book that has a certain sensitiveness, but also interactivity. And hopefully by doing this, it's not an easy process without tearing it apart, you will, as a reader, also think more and relate more to the content of this publication. Another intervention we did recently was with this thick book that is lying there, Sarajevo to Paris. This book is about an archive of 160,000 analog images that we reduced to a selection of 1,400 images, more or less. But we started with a 400-page book from budget point of view, concept point of view, architecture point of view, and we ended up with a book of 816 pages, which in a way definitely increases the budget on this book, but also it increases the physical needs to make this book solid and strong. Anyway, we went for it, but at the end I was not really happy with the thickness of the book, because it starts to look like a coffee table book. And again, it's more like an archive book. I want this book to be an inspiration for young people, or for students, or for people from the academies, or from the fashion world, to work with this book as a manual. But if it's like a very fancy hardcover, it will never work like that, or it will never have this effect. So at the end, we decided again to put some slight and very vulnerable paper around this book as a wrap, to also give it a little bit, at a certain moment, it will definitely become a vintage-like book, which in this case I really like, fashion-related, and I also don't want it to be too fancy. Questions in the meantime? Ideas? Interventions? Is somebody making a book at the moment? Or not yet? Or soon? making or starting? Okay. We will help you a bit.
Yeah, I'm collecting all the sketches now and trying to make a story with the sketches. Yeah.
Okay. And is it a book for publication, or is it, for example, a one-copy artist book?
Last year I made an edition of 8, and now I'm maybe thinking of doing an edition of maybe 15. It's not a big publication.
Yeah,
no.
for me that's still an artist book. Okay. And why are you making the book?
It's
This is my alarm. So either you wake up now, either. So it's already. So we have more or less 15, 20 minutes to. So
Okay.
sorry. Go ahead.
It's because all my work is almost in a sketchbook or very little, and I see the book as an object. So, like you said, the 4D dimension. It moves around. It has a life on its own. That I think it's very interesting, and how the book transforms itself.
Okay.
It has really a life of its own. So yeah.
And you mentioned you published one last year, and you're doing now. And is this book evolving from the first idea you have into the final object?
Yeah.
Is there a whole process, or?
Yeah, it's more of it's more precise. The first one was a tryout, I think, and now I'm really having an idea with, okay, this is what I want, and the quality has to go up. I don't know.
Okay,
how to
good.
say it.
But this also means that you reflected on your first publication, and that this first publication helps you to make your second publication.
Yeah, yeah.
Good.
Okay.
So it's part of this learning process. It's part of making decisions. It's part of feeling more comfortable with books. Looking also at a book as not per definition a mistake or something else. From each book you can learn. It often happens to me too that I look at a book, I've been in a process for months and months and months working on it, and then I think, next time I will do it differently. Of course I will not tell the artist, but it's my own reflection at that moment. So, but it's nice, and you will finish it in a couple of weeks or months or years, or?
I hoping the end of the year, but I'm not really sure about it.
Good. And you get some advice, or you're doing this completely by yourself?
I haven't asked for advice yet, but I'm planning on to do so. Yeah.
Okay, good. Good, because in a way, if it's an artist book, it can become a sculpture, it can become anything. It can be a chair, a book can be a chair, it can be a pedestal, it can be a statue. At a certain moment, of course, it's never bad to get advice from other people. On the other hand, sometimes there is good advice and there is bad advice. And I think also as an artist, you have to follow your own vision as an artist, mission as an artist. So sometimes it can become more complicated to get lots of advices. And if you ask 10 people, sometimes you will get 10 different advices. So anyway, but you like it to make a book?
I think it really lends into the way I'm working. I collect everything. It's very difficult to explain it in English. I collect and everything that cuts me. Michael Bormas said once, a knife in the eye, and that's really about. That's really describes everything I do with my art, and then I put it together so it's like a part of my brain, I think, the book. So yeah.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Are there more questions?
Johan, you are also making a book. Can you tell something about it?
I was making a book last year. I'm from graphic design, and I did project, a photography project since 2017. So I was working on a book that would allow me to put all the photographs I took since 2017 together, and to have like how do you say? Because so the photo project it lasted about 2 years long, and it's still ongoing. But because I did it with a friend who I met in Japan when I was living there, when she was pregnant, so the book itself is mostly about the journey of her pregnancy. So I made the book last year, and I really enjoyed the process. And as Bruno said, I had about like 5 or 6 copies. Oh no, 5 or 6 versions before I had the final. Well, still, there's still a lot of things needs to be done. But I'm still working on it, and I had a few meetings with Bruno's, and also I was talking with. I actually also talked with a lot of people. I also talked to Nico. It also really helped me on constructing the object and of course the story inside the book as well.
Yeah, I'm at the moment challenging Yuan from point of view that his book is for 97.5% almost finished from design point of view. Conceptually, he worked very hard, following for 2 years the subject of the book. But today, and now I go back to giving and making the book alive. The time is over that you make a book and you drop it in a library or in a bookshop and that's it. It doesn't work like that anymore. It used to be like that often. So the artist, he created a book. Most of the time it were famous artists that were related to big institutions, and the book found its way in libraries via selling. Today it doesn't work anymore. Luckily, many young people are creating books, are publishing books, or co-publishing, or co-editing books. But who are you? And the bookshop, most of the time, doesn't know your name. So it's very difficult today, although there is an alternative market via online. But from a book market point of view, you have to be visible. Your artworks have to be visible. And in this case, I ask Yuan, because his book is already finished, almost finished, I asked him for the next coming months to see how we can bring his book back to life. It could be an afterlife, but the book isn't there yet. So from that point of view, it's already anticipating on a finished book, which will be finished in April next year, more or less. But still, he's already working on presentations, imaginary talks, dialogues, presentations, book signings, and so on, social media campaigns of a book that is not yet there. But I'm challenging this because also for a young artist like Yuan, if not, it will be, maybe this book can find its way in an alternative circuit, because there are a lot of photo bookstores all over the world that specialize in artist publication, non-commercial publications, but then it stays a bit marginal. So the big question is, how can you use the book as a tool to present yourself in the art world, tell your story, share your story, and engage people in doing things together? Because of course, every book is also like, we used to have business cards, and I still have a business card, but many people don't have business cards anymore. You have an Instagram account, that's your business card. But for some of you, you have a book. I have my books. And what I can say is from each and every book that is here, I can write another book that is as thick and as big as the book I originally created in the storytelling of making the book. 2 weeks ago, I had a book presentation for the book of Ulrike Bolens, and the mayor was there. And the mayor was, I don't know, for 13 minutes reading his text speech, telling about the exhibition, telling about the city, and telling a bit what he understood from the book. And then there was the curator, and he had also 6 pages of text, and he was also reading his text, which was good. It made sense, it was rational, was nothing wrong with it. And then I came, I was the third, and I had something in my mind that I wanted to tell about Ulrike and how we worked together for the last couple of years working on this book. But of course, those guys, they already told 60% of what I wanted to tell. So it's like, okay, but I didn't have 6 pages of text. I could say, you guys had text, but I have a book. And if I have this book in my hand for another 2 hours, I can tell stories, experiences, I can tell about the artist's practice, and so on, which is more human, which is more real than a theoretical thing. And this is the beauty of working with living artists. Because in a way, during 1 month or 3 months or 3 years, you share a road together to complete at the end something which is here. And that's one of the most beautiful things that I can work on every day. More questions, more ideas.
Yeah, I have quite an important question about another sort of artist books that we are very known here. I think this is a very important question for our students that are studying printmaking. As printmakers, we learn to make books ourselves, so we print them. Mm-hmm. And I would like to know what is your opinion about the difference, and is there a difference between these 2 types of books? The artist book, that it's completely made by the artist, that it's printed. Most of the time, it's a totally different approach, as you were saying, like you can like tear it and tear the pages out. These books are treated with gloves. They often stay on shelves behind the glass, and they are mostly made in a very small edition because it's also quite labor to print them, and it's very expensive to bind them yourself. You have to have knowledge about it. So what do you think about that?
I love it, but it's completely something different. And it's different from purpose point of view that most of these books are created as a platform to distribute the artworks of the artist or the art practice or an art series. What you mention is really the artist book as a unique or an edition of 8 or 15 or 50, whatever, all numbered, all signed or manually made, maybe all different too. Because what I see here, and when I talk about the architecture of the book, we print in print runs with very expensive, high technology machines. So today, that's most of the time my job. On the other hand, we also make sometimes limited editions to finance the book. But what you are mentioning, I think it's fantastic. There used to be a time when the Picassos of this world, they spend a lot of time in ateliers and in print workshops, which is beautiful. And again, each and every print is probably different. But I don't think you could compare the 2 of them.
But I think that what we are talking about here tonight and the way that you are presenting these books is, to me, it opens up another vision, and it is also coming very close. Like I can also see the students in our studios that are starting to combine these 2 different types of books in one book, or seeing also an artist book without differentiation. So I don't know if they are really that different. I think it's an interesting topic to think about and to talk about these differences.
Well, but what's also possible is to mix certain elements from, let's call it an artisan production and a really technological high-end production. I think even both of them can be combined. I remember last year when we made a project together for the province of Antwerp, where Nico made a fantastic installation in the new building. We also created a book, and this book had a sleeve. The sleeve was covering up and protecting the book, and was actually referring to the installation in the house of the province house in Antwerp. But the sleeve was printed here in screen print, which was nice because it made that every print was different. We also printed them on big carton board sheets, which were cutted. Sometimes they were turned around. And when you saw these sleeves, at the end we had more or less 8 different ones, I think. So this also creates a very beautiful dynamic, and some were really beautiful black, other were beautiful gray, other were beautiful silverish, because at a certain moment we didn't have the ink anymore to make them all at the same level. So it was beautiful to have this combination between a high-tech book printed on a, I don't know, 2.5 million euro machine, and then a sleeve which was made here in the academy. And I strongly believe that it's again this combination of these elements. On the other hand, there is a different purpose. Here we talk about 100, 300, 2,500 books. And when you mention these artisan-made books, it's about, again, maybe 1 copy, maybe 15 copies, maybe 30 copies, maybe 50. So for me, in a way, they have a different purpose. At the end, it could be a book. So I love both of them. And again, this mixture, combining different techniques. It could be screen printing. We just did a book with screen printing on the cover. It was beautiful to have a screen printed cover. I didn't make yet a book with Riso print in it, and I still don't understand it, because already for years I'm saying I need to have a book with a mix and match of high-end offset printing and, for example, Riso printing. It didn't happen yet. Why? I don't know. Maybe I should push it for myself a bit further. But again, it's nice to have different elements bringing together. And again, it's about the energy. When you see this little creature here, this white book, it's called Nothing, and it's an artist book by Zhang. It was also the first winner of the Stockmans Prize. And if you look at the book and you go through it on a first view, there is nothing. Even if you have to look for the title, you will really have to look for the title, but it's there. It's printed ton sur ton, white on white, but it's there, depending also on the light. On the other hand, if you open the book, something is happening all the time with this book. But what I found the most important part, and I don't know if you remember, the book was manually bound. So each and every book passed through the hands. It was printed on a very big machine, a huge machine. But finally, the book was bound also by E. For days and days and days, she was binding this book manually, together with Johan, and I helped also a lot. We were running around in the atelier, bringing all the sheets together. And at the end, I really think that you can feel this manual part in relation to the technological part, and that some people are really dying to get this book into their hands because it has this something happened here. So this for me is a very good example of what you just mentioned, and where I'm saying maybe we can do nice mixes in technique and practice. Other ideas, questions?
Hello. At the beginning, you mentioned that every time you start a book with an artist, the first question you ask them is, why do you want to make a book? And I was thinking about it, and it's a simple question, but the more I think about it, the less of an answer I can give if I wanted to make a book. And I was just wondering if artists ever gave you an answer that surprised you, or that you didn't expect at all, or that like stuck with you, or made you see creating a book in a different way or something.
For me, the main reason, the why question, is that I also want to understand who you are as a person, who you are as an artist, where your goals are, what is the actual reason of making a book. It could be just because you want to fulfill something from inside out. On the other hand, I live in the art world, and the art world is sometimes, there are incredibly beautiful sides on the art world, but sometimes it's a very perverse world, it's a very market-oriented world. So I also want to understand, again, who you are, and why this book could add something too. And again, this couldn't be from really a creative burst of idea and tension that you want to make this book, but on the other hand, it's most of the time not that innocent. And I don't mean it bad, because everybody has to live, and at the end of the day we have to eat something. Guess who's coming to dinner? But it's really important that I know it for myself. It's also fashion haptic for me, is one of those fashion trendy words at the moment that are used in any context today, also in relationship to everything that is digital. But for example, the word authentic is also very important for me. And I also, via this question, I want to understand where your authenticity is as a person, as a human being, and maybe as an artist. Often it happens that I ask you, are you really an artist? Which is even more shocking. And there is nothing wrong to be a designer. Or for example, you could be a good case as a photographer, filmmaker. Are you an artist? Are you an applied photographer working as a servant for other people to bring something visually alive? I think these are very important questions. For example, if Zeger would like to make a book with me, I really would love to know, and I will challenge him, and we will put the fire a little bit warmer and harder until he's bursting out in sweat, until I know the answer. Is this an artistic book? Is this a documentary book? Is this a photo book? And again, it's not about right or wrong. It's more about how are we going to design and make this object reflecting the fact that he's more like an applied photographer or an artist photographer or a documentary photographer. If you know, do you understand what I mean? It's the same with applied design. Is it design or is it art? Difficult question. And maybe today it's more design, but maybe in 30 years it's art. Because some institutions will pick it up and you will say in this period, 2021, this was so relevant and blah, blah, blah. So this is also part of my strategy to understand what you really would like to reach with your publication. Was I surprised? Yeah, often. Because often I didn't know you. And often having this dialogue or visiting your atelier, I discovered certain things which were invisible. This is also nice. There's a lot of perception happening here. I can create a fake world, which is maybe not fake, but it's not reality. And what I also believe is in this dialogue that we have together while making a book, surprising things happen. Definitely. Other ideas? Emma, do you want to share about a book or not a book? Or
Well, I'm only just starting the book, so it's not quite a book yet. Yeah, it's going to be a surprise.
No, Emma surprised me, huh?
Oh.
Because in a way, I know her practice a little bit, not too well. I saw some exhibitions. We had some talks together. I saw some drawings of her. And then last time we met, we were talking for almost 3 hours, I think, about your book project. And she really surprised me, because at the end she said, does it have to be a book? And I'm talking here today, 3 hours at the university, already an hour here about the first and the second and the third and the fourth dimension of a book. And then Emma is saying, does it have to be a book? And I'm not talking about e-books or other publications. I'm really talking about something extra, and I think we will get there without any problem. But that was also shocking for me. And I like this fact that a young artist is able to question what I do every day. So, but it's still a secret, so we're not gonna talk too much about it yet.
Well, it's a secret to myself as well, so it's quite hard to talk about it, yeah.
But that's nice what you just mentioned. It's a secret to myself. So I think it's also an answer to your question now, because it means that nothing is predefined. And that's also the nice thing on how we will evolve in our project together. But it's something that will unravel itself during this process and during exchange, communication, again, bringing other people into the process. For example, if I have conversations with Nico, he's also able to surprise me often, because he can look with a complete different glass to certain things, which is, of course, as a strong personality, his opinion, and then we can have a discussion about it. But it's also nice sometimes to have a different view and a different opinion. And at the end, most of the time, wonderful things can happen. By the way, I should not forget, but next Thursday, and this is a primeur, eh? Nobody has seen it yet except the two of us. Eh? Okay, but I'm not going to open it up. But next Thursday, near the IJzerlaan in Antwerp, on the IJzerlaan, in a place called Metal, which is for us a pop-up place. Good. So it has a philosophical touch too. We will present a new publication that we made together, Curious, Nico's publishing house, and Stockmans, and it's called Avec le vent. And it's a beautiful, beautiful project, which we will present next week, as from 7 o'clock in the evening, at this place called Metal. And there will be a film projection, the book will be presented, and depending on Corona, there will be drinks or there won't be drinks, but that we cannot anticipate yet. But it's also a beautiful project that Nico initiated in 2016, what was followed up in 2020, always in Marseille, in the Mediterranean Sea, and Nico created an exhibition on the sea, which per definition means that this project was actually very performative. So for 4 days, the exhibition, and always in different constellations, was presented. I'm not going to tell you more. There's a movie that will give you the vibe and the atmosphere. And then Nico tried to translate his vision, artistic vision, into a technological and paper and conceptual vision in making a book. So if you don't have enough of everything I told you today, you are welcome next Thursday at 7 o'clock in Antwerp. So this was something besides this specific talk. Any more questions? Okay. I think if everybody is satisfied for now, we are more or less on schedule. So I think we could finish this talk. I want to finish with two things. I have a little brochure for each and every one of you, a little catalog that I made for Koen van den Broek 2 months ago for an exhibition in Lempertz in Brussels. It's a small publication, and you are welcome to pick up your own copy here. And I started my talk with a quote of Spencer Tracy in the movie Guess Who's Coming to Dinner? And I would like to end my talk with another quote of Spencer Tracy related to the movie. Well, Tilly, when the hell are we gonna get some dinner? Thank you for being here.